Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the next program in our wonderful conference today. Isn't this been a great event? And I hope those that are online are benefiting and realizing that what a great idea to talk about a subject, topic matter, a need, a desperation that has to be addressed. This afternoon, our segment is entitled Living a Sober Life. I'm going to be going first, followed by Gene Dethridge Jr., also Scott Phipps. You've just seen a little bit of information about what we do at Mission of Hope. For time's sake, that'll help you get a feel. We're an Appalachian relief ministry. We're based in Knoxville. We're 26 years old. We were birthed from the realization that we were driving around, flying over a mission field in Knoxville and other cities that was totally unbeknownst to a lot of people. And from a one-time event, we thought in 1996, this ministry has bloomed and blossomed like a tree. And we're grateful for the privilege of serving in rural Appalachia. We hang our hats in an office and warehouse in Knoxville. I love to tell people when I walk them through it, the best feature in the building is God provided every penny to buy. He provided every penny to purchase trucks, equipment, anything we need. And that, in fact, is why we were able to expand services in the way we do. We only operate in Northeast Tennessee, Southeast Kentucky, Southwest Virginia. We're in the counties that are classified as the poorest counties, most distressed counties by the Appalachian Regional Commission on the list that they keep updated every couple of years. Once again, because of time's sake today, I'm going to try to give you a Cliff Notes version. I want to tell you a little bit about who I am. I was born and raised in Salisbury, North Carolina. That's right between Charlotte and Greensboro. It's the home to Food Line grocery stores, which I don't know if you have any near. It's also the home to Catawba College, which in Tennessee, a lot of people know in the Knoxville area because of it's a big sports rival to Carson Newman University. But to our family and to people from that area, it's home to the greatest soft drink you'll ever taste. It's called Cherwine. It's a cherry cola. Here's some yeses in here. You either like it or you don't like it. It's not alcoholic, but that's where it's made in Salisbury. So my mother died when I was a young boy after a 10-year battle with scleroderma. I would be introduced to a lady in 1983 in Nashville, where I moved from Salisbury after college and working my first job there, to meet a lady who was from the tip end of Virginia, Lee County, Virginia, that touches near Harrogate, Tennessee, Bell County, Kentucky. Found out the first evening we went out that her mother died when she was a young teenager. Her name is Valerie. We have been blessed to have two children. We have a daughter who is a Belmont University grad. She and her husband, who is the son-in-law you pray for, and two of our three grandchildren now live back in the Knoxville area. Our son is an Air Force Academy grad. He is a pilot and recently been in a program that we didn't even really know a lot about where he was, but he is now out of that, and he lives somewhere else and has a child as well. So we feel we have been blessed. But what I want to talk to you about today, as the beloved Paul Harvey used to say, is the rest of my story. We all have a story. We're all on a life journey path. It's that simple. Sometimes we get off the journey of life and we get detoured, and we hope, as a believer, we pray that we'll get back on it. Some do, some don't. I grew up and people thought I was going to be the first preacher in our family. I was kind of a shy, quiet young boy, very close to my mother. And my life story I sent out a couple of years ago, and the title of it was 50 Years Ago Today, written on July 23rd, 1970. This story was written 2020, July 23rd. 50 years ago today, my life changed forever. I came home from being in a friend's house to find my mother non-responsive. My mother suffered desperately for 10 years from a disease called scleroderma. I found her unconscious. My father would take me to my grandfather's. He would go to the hospital. He would come back to my grandfather's with tears rolling down his face and let us all know she didn't make it. At that moment, unbeknownst to me, my life started changing. My father did everything he could to raise me, provide for me. I have one sister who's 6 years older. She was away at college. But I had to start making efforts to be friends with people and come out of the shell I was in, and I did. But it began because a church loved on me, a family loved on me, neighbors and friends loved on me. I got involved with our youth group. I led it. I preached my first sermon 50 years ago, just a few months ago. I visited a seminary. It looked like I was going to be going to pastor's college after I got out of college. But I basically got to college and I hit the trifecta in a bad way. I discovered partying and drinking and other things and a different way of life. And I fell away from my passion and my time and my living for the Lord. And I struggled. I struggled in a place that my dear pastor, who was an incredible mentor hero to me until he passed a couple of years ago, used to call Ulcer Gulch. It's that land you're in when you know you're not living maybe the way you need to be. And it's just tough. Life is just tough. So through some challenges that I was in the middle of, and it didn't look like there was any way out, I had a very signature moment of reality for me. I remember when it happened. I remember where it happened. And I want to make sure you understand before I go any further, I appreciate every kind of substance abuse treatment plan idea that we're talking about today. I'm just giving you a different idea from a faith perspective of what could be at play for some people too. So in desperation, I prayed for change, for God to help me, and what would proceed to happen through a sequence of events within the next several months, I would go through a career change, a move from Nashville to Knoxville, an introduction to some people who were very concerned about how my lifestyle had taken me in a different direction. I was always faithful to my dear wife. She prayed for me to have change. And what I came to realize is I really had a problem with alcohol. I would never have acknowledged it. It was hard for me to understand, but something really powerful in my journey happened shortly after we moved to Knoxville. Once again, since this is a faith-based part of our program that we're talking about, I think without question, God put someone in my life that was an alcoholic. And through getting to know them, I realized I had the same problem. I had a lot of the same issues. I was struggling with a lot of the same things. And there were a sequence of events that transpired then, back in 1991, early 1992. I made a total change in life direction that can only have been completed by the power of God's grace and the power of prayer. I believe without hesitation that the older we get, the more important it is to have a childlike faith. You see, a childlike faith is what your kids can trust because you told them it was correct. They knew it was correct. A childlike faith is imperative. My story is kind of unique because after a sequence of things that happened within my family transpired, as a broken man, I submitted my life to service, to ministry, and within months, I was out of the life I led, out of the job I had, and I was in ministry. And once again, for time's sake, I stand before you in ministry for almost 30 years, but I stand before you, as I call it, 30 years undefeated. 30 years undefeated without a drop of alcohol. I give God the praise, credit, and glory for that. So what is it about a faith-based idea suggestion? It may not be for some the avenue that takes them from whatever dilemma they're dealing with. I understand all that. I really do. I think sometimes with problems that happen in our life, and certainly substance abuse, alcohol, whatever other addiction that transpires that we're dealing with or a problem, you know, if you ever take a snow globe like you see at Christmas and shake it up, when you're looking from the outside in, it looks chaotic, doesn't it? It's just nothing but snowflakes going everywhere. And that's the way life can be for people inside that snow globe of life. It's chaotic. They've got every kind of dysfunction, every kind of problem. People from the outside can see it first. And sometimes people can never get through the chaotic snow, but sometimes the snow settles and everything becomes clear. And that's the way life can be. We deal with some heart-wrenching situations at Mission of Hope. We work with poverty on an everyday basis. We send trucks loaded with the various items like you heard or saw on the video to what we call the frontline foot soldiers of Appalachian. All through Appalachia, there are mountain ministry centers. A lot of them are just mom and pop retired couples that were heartbroken to help the poor. So they begged for the empty storefront building to start the clothing closet, food pantry, furniture ministry. But they hit a wall immediately. Most of where we go, my friends, will never be near an interstate. And there's no big churches there to write them a check to get stuff with. There's certainly no industrial parks near most of where we go. So we became a conduit of resources. We have a truck being driven today to Eastern Kentucky to a ministry. We send trucks out every week loaded with whatever we get in our warehouse in Knoxville. So day-to-day resources would be the first branch of the Mission of Hope tree. The second and third are what you saw pictures of. Christmas and back to school are incredible programs that we just added. From one school in 96, we're up to 29 elementary schools all throughout rural Appalachia. We built handicap ramps. We didn't do that through the COVID period. We've resumed that. We qualify those through the principals and or the ministry centers that we serve. We give scholarships out, and we just began this year doing that again in high schools in the rural areas where we go to. We also have a scholarship endowment at Alice Lloyd and LMU. We do outreach events, and during COVID, we had to change that. We have set up in gyms, church basements, National Guard armories, loan buildings. For years, we did that. The last 2 years, we've done drive-through giveaways in these rural areas, just trying to give food out, hygiene, first aid kits without meds, Bibles and tracts, an encouraging word of, I hope we can help you here. When you think about people who are dealing with an alcohol problem and any substance abuse, but I'm kind of honing in with my personal testimony, it got to be really tough. It got to be tough for me to acknowledge that I really needed help. And I keep looking back at my situation where I could have easily sought professional help. I know my situation was kind of unique, but the faith part of what kicked in for me, at first, unbeknownst to me, I'm convinced without hesitation, that's what has brought me through this journey. I'm a big proponent of prayer and believe that that is one of the greatest tools we have for each other and for people doing that for us as well. I think about some of the things that we've gotten to do at Mission of Hope, and I like to tell people we're in the hope fulfillment business. I would offer to you, hope is a powerful element. We use at Mission of Hope the definition, hope is the confident expectation of good. Hope, the confident expectation of good. Not the entitled to, not that you're owed, it's the confident expectation of good. In this room, at this event, all over online areas, everywhere we go, reality is some people today could be hoping that the health tests they took or are about to take come back negative. Some people could be dreading that the situation they've got, be it personal, family, marital, may not get resolved, but they're hoping it does. And there could be people that hope the rumored pink slips coming at their company don't impact them. So hope is powerful. I've kind of come to realize that as we deal with problems in life, and especially this particular problem, there's got to be a moment of realization that I've got to have some help. I would offer a higher power might be a great source to try. All we're really talking about today, or I'm beginning to talk about in this segment, is that a lot of things I tried didn't work out. But I think as well, I finally tried to not worry about questioning so much and deal with I'm going to be genuine. I'm going to be faithful. I'm going to live what I've heard on Sunday, what I've done as a personal Bible study. And that for me is what began the wheels of change. It's humbling when you tell your story, and there are a lot of details that I wouldn't share here. But when I think about what led me to start life differently, every day we wake up and we kind of go into what I call the swimming pool building of life. It's Monday every day sometimes. We get up and we don't want to go out into the world. We just don't want to go that day, but we do because that's what we're supposed to do. We get in that swimming pool building of life, if you would, and it's dark and grungy and you don't have lights and you're not crazy about being in there, but that's what you do. You crawl up on the diving board because you got to come in. You've got to go deal with whatever, whoever, whatever kind of problem today. You got to do it. You can't put it off anymore. So you get ready to come into life that day. You're at the top of the diving board and you turn around and say, not today. I'm going back down. And then I would offer to you, faith kicks in when it says, no, I'm going to go back to the end of the diving board and I'm going to jump in because I know God would never let me empty or jump into an empty pool. There's a powerful visual there if you think about that. So what I think is imperative to at least consider as we deal with treatment options, solutions, the poverty that goes with the problems that go with the uncertainty, the chaoticness that goes with when there's problems with substance abuse or whatever other addiction, it's a real viable option to consider faith. And I encourage all that deal with whatever dilemma to at least entertain that option. I think it's imperative that we realize that God can really be there and can help you. It's not an easy process. It's just saying that for many who might know that. But I encourage people to go back sometimes to maybe a memory of when a mother or father or grandparent or family member prayed for you and realize those prayers were done years ago, but they're effective even now. I count it a privilege to be here today. I think this topic matter. I believe that substance abuse is the kudzu that's choking the life out of society. Kudzu entwines itself around anything and it kills it. And I know without being told that grandparents raising grandchildren is at an epidemic level. And that includes Country Club America. It's everywhere. So I'm just thrilled to get to share a little bit for my own personal testimony. I'm grateful for the folks that put on this event today. And thank you for being a part of it, whether in person or online. I want to introduce Gene Dethridge Jr., Outreach and Engagement Specialist with the Fletcher Group. He's our next speaker. Thank you.
Well, my name is Gene Dethridge Jr., and I'm a person committed to long-term recovery. And so what that means for me is that I have not found it necessary to use alcohol or any form of illicit or illegal mood or mind-altering substance since July the 19th of 2014. That's not special. It's got very little to do with me. But today is very special for me to be here in Barberville, Kentucky, because this is where all my people are from. My family lineage goes back here in Knox County at least 150 years, which was the first of us that come over from England. There was a little layover in North Carolina for some of them, but then, we got into the hollers here and just never went any further. But this building itself used to be the hospital for Knox County. And my grandfather was on the board of directors and board of trustees for this and the nursing home. And my father was born in this hospital when it was a hospital. And, right across the street is Knox Funeral Home, and that's where we had Dad's funeral when he passed away at the age of 46 of untreated alcoholism when I was 19. And, my experience of substance use disorder started here in Knox County. Um, right down the road is a little place called Thomas Walker Park. There's a replica of the first house that was built in Kentucky by the pioneers and settlers, the European settlers of America. And I used illicit drugs there for the first time when I was about 15 years old. And up until that point, I'd had a lot of suicidal ideation. I had one very close suicide attempt that was intervened by what I understand to be a power greater than myself, God, my understanding, if you will. And then I found drugs and alcohol. And I'll never forget the day that I used the first time, for the first time in my memorable life since I was a little bitty boy, I was okay with everything that was going on in the world. And I was okay with who you were and how you acted. And I was okay with who I was and how I acted. And, you could say that it completed me in a very real way. And, I would come to find out in later years, that's what I've come to understand is the hallmark of substance use disorder. If you don't have that experience, you can breathe yourself a sigh of relief. You probably don't have an SUD or an AUD, whichever term you want to use. But that was definitely my experience. And so in that moment, I decided that I would dedicate every amount of talent, ability, and energy that I had to the endless pursuit of that sensation. It was my one and only goal in life. I did pretty good in high school. Had a real good shot at joining the Air Force. Pretty good. And I had a good job in high school too. And just, one by one, I surrendered these things because they started to get in the way of my next use. And I loved the way Dr. Mooney put it in his presentation earlier today. I was the guy on that cycle. I would destroy some stuff and then I'd go back and do it again. And that went on for several years. There was a wonderful woman here in town because I was just lost the summer after I finished high school. And I can't even remember who told me or how I ended up in her office, but her name was Cherie St. Louis Smith. And she was like, well, you should go to college. And I thought that was a great idea because in college you get drunk and you chase women. And after 4 years, you magically come out the other side. You probably got a wife and you're an adult with a good job, right? Like that's what's on TV. And, she told me to go and I was like, okay, I'll go. And, suddenly I wasn't here anymore where I had family members that, worked in local government and worked in law enforcement. And so I started to get held accountable for my actions. I started to get in trouble when, I would get out of hand. Before that, people would just take me home. They're like, don't do that again, June Barry. You know better. And, it's like, like others have shared, there was a lot of trauma and some bad stuff that happened in my life. And for a long time, I used that as a valid reason to continue to use and drink. We had experiences with poverty, severe experiences with mental illness, severe experiences with alcoholism, violence in the home, all that sort of stuff. So I felt entitled to the relief that I experienced from drugs and alcohol. And, I also felt entitled that I shouldn't face these consequences. But I faced them anyway. And, eventually, after a couple of years, I dropped out of college. And then I was 19 when Dad died. Dad died of untreated alcoholism. And, we're tried and true Eastern Kentucky family. I remember when we're planning the funeral, like we're going to put it in the obituary as a heart attack. And we're not going to write in there that he drank himself to death. We're not going to tell people that he drank himself to death. We're not going to acknowledge that at the funeral. That part is going to be the secret part. We're just all going to be sad that he's dead. And it was devastating for me. As much difficulty as we have, losing a parent is hard. And my heart breaks every time I think about how many children we have that have lost their parents. Or their parents are spending a lot of time in incarceration because their sickness is also something that's illegal. And so, I just bounced around for several years and like it got bad. Like, I moved around. I'd move back and live with my grandmother. I'd get a job. I'd lose a job. I'd move to another town. I'd keep trying to finish school. And just, failure after failure after failure. And I became obsessed with this idea because I had been so successful my entire conscious life of being able to either get over top of or get underneath of or get around some way or through whatever obstacle was in my path. And so I believed at the core of my being that I would be able to find the solution to this issue. And that kept me sick for a long time. But, eventually legal consequences continued to pile up. I eventually pled guilty to multiple felonies. And then I was sent to an outpatient recovery program, treatment program rather. I did what they asked me to do. I can color inside the lines. You tell me to color inside the lines, I can do that. And so I did that to get rid of the troubles that were in front of me. In the midst of all this, I had a child. And then as soon as that program was done, I started drinking again, very shortly after. And then sporadically in binges and spurts. And, life got horrible at home. And before I knew it, because I swore I would never be like my father. I swore that I would never allow drugs and alcohol to take over my life, and that if I ever had a child, I would do something different. But it turned out that I did not have the power to do anything different, and I became the same person. And so eventually I violated the terms that the court had set out for me to remain in society, and I returned to court, and in an act of desperation, in terrible fear of going to prison, I begged that they would send me to a recovery program. And I had the good fortune that, God and they saw fit to allow me to have that opportunity. So in 2014, September the 4th of 2014, after hanging out in county for a couple months, I went to the Morehead Inspiration Center, which is part of the Recovery Kentucky Network, which was based on the model at the Healing Place here in Louisville, Kentucky, and they built that, some other components nationally, just different things in the recovery field. And I lived there for 13 months, and I did absolutely everything that they asked me to do. They introduced me to a spiritual-based recovery program through one of the 12-step fellowships, and I followed that and was able to have what I understand as a spiritual awakening and a spiritual experience that put me into a conscious relationship with power that is greater than myself, that has restored me to sanity. And, from that point on, I was able to, I always like to joke, it took me 8 years to get 3 years worth of, 2.5 years worth of a bachelor degree when I was drinking. It took me 1.5 years to get 1.5 years worth of bachelor's degree after I got sober. So I was able to finish that. When I went back to MSU, I got to work on trying to help them develop a collegiate recovery program. Unfortunately, we couldn't get any funding for it, but it was cool to work on, because I wanted to help other students that had fallen through the cracks kind of like I had, because they just didn't have enough resources, a lot of like what we're talking about here today. I received a job at the Morehead Inspiration Center, and this is a part of my story that I've come to appreciate in a different light now, and there's a guy, he works at the University of Kentucky, I'm not gonna say his name, but I love the way he puts it. I can't think of a better way to put it. My recovery is not unique. Like, the fact that I recovered is the same story as millions of other people. Like, that's not the special part. The special part about my recovery is the fact that my grandfather bought me a car when I finished the recovery program. The recovery program that I went through hired me. Um, I had family members that had taught me how to pay bills, how to sign up for electric. I knew how to go get a leasing agreement. I knew how to get a driver's license. I knew how to change my address. I knew how to open up a bank account. These soft skills, as people call them. Now we call it recovery capital. I am not the average. I am the exception to the rule of the people that we try to help. I'm extremely literate. I had a concrete education when I was young, and I had family members that taught me the basic skills of life. I am the exception. I am not the rule. That is the only thing that's special about my recovery. In the way that I understand that today, I've so far for the past almost 8 years, I've dedicated my life to trying to make recovery possible for other people. Um, I eventually got joint custody of my son. So he lives with me every other week. And I'm proud to say that I am a father in the full sense of the word. There's a difference between being a dad and being a father. Being a father means you take responsibility. Being a father means you're there. And most of all, being a father means you put aside your own needs and your own pleasures to meet the needs and the pleasures of your children. It was hard to learn that and painful to learn that, but I'm so proud that that's who I am today. Another exception to my story, again, exception, not the rule. I was given what's called a diversion program, which means I have all my civil liberties back. And I no longer have a criminal record of any sort unless I tell you about it. It's pretty cool on the piece of paper they give you when you do that. It says, it shall be as if it never occurred. The exact language the legal system uses. They wave a magic wand and I was never a criminal. And you can't prove otherwise unless I tell you about it. I was able to buy a home. I got my master's degree in public administration. And then I was given the opportunity to work for former Governor Fletcher when they got a grant from the Health Resources Services Administration. That's the part of HHS that takes care of rural America. I'd never heard of it. But, now I try and help other people improve the quality of their recovery ecosystem in rural communities. Because I want people to have the opportunity and the opportunities that I've had. And they may not look like my opportunities. I don't get to say what meaningful employment is for somebody else. I don't get to say what success is for them necessarily. And I've come to genuinely and deeply appreciate the gifts that I was given as an individual. I was talking to a dear friend of mine this morning about it. I used to be so proud of my intelligence. I'm so much smarter than you, and I was so proud of that, and I loved being the smartest guy in the room, and I loved to rub it in your face. That part of me had to die when I wanted to recover. I had to learn some humility, and now I understand that the only reason in the world that I have any of the gifts and aptitudes that I have, the reason that I've had the blessings that I've had in my life, the only reason was to make sure that I was equipped to be of maximum service to God and my fellow man. Period. The end. The end of story. I can only say with absolute 100% confidence, look you in the eye, that I feel like God has ever spoken to me in my life but one time. And I was about 2 years sober, and I was just sitting, like I rented a little rinky-dink apartment, and I was just sitting there, and I just heard this still small voice, and it said, grow where you're planted. And I didn't know what that meant. But as time has gone on, it's meant making friends with so many people that are trying to help Appalachia. It's meant going through the Bright Leadership Program, Leadership Kentucky, working for Governor Fletcher, getting to work with Representative Bowling on the Recovery Ready Communities legislation, being appointed by Governor Beshear to the committee to work on that. And again, it's not because I'm special. Like, that's the only thing I hope y'all take from this. Like, I was given the opportunity to use my gifts to help other people. And for me, that's what recovery is about. And that's all it's about. But I love you all and thank you for your time.
Hey, Gene, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. I thought about something just now, and I know we're about to be blessed by your story. I go back to the opening comment. We're all on a life journey path. What we share right off the bat, we were in bottom of the ditch moments. When you're in the bottom of a ditch, all you see is dirt on each side. Sometimes you see a light at the top, and somewhere or another you get up to the light. I love testimonial stories that you're behind by 21 going into the fourth quarter and you come back to win. But I would offer to you, God has a big role in that. Really does. I think about, I don't know your story, but you've got one. For some of you online that you're going through whatever and about ready to quit, don't do it. Don't do it. Don't quit. I think today, if I've got it right, amongst us are the heroes of the work that's being done. It's not an easy job. You're dealing with hopeless situations. You're dealing with losing situations, generational poverty. Somehow or another, we've got to break the cycle of poverty in America. It begins with, you got to get an education. You've got to finish high school. You don't have to go to Harvard, Yale, UK, UT, but you have got to get a high school diploma. We preach that. We believe it. We invest in kids. So keep that in mind today. Hey, I want to introduce Scott Phipps, founder of Hope City Recovery Center. Thank you, Scott, for being here.
Yeah. Well, I've been called a lot of things in my life, but this is the first day I've ever been called Scott Phipps. Because my name is actually Michael Schaefer.
My apologies.
No worries, no worries. But, 24 hours ago, I didn't know I was going to be on a panel. And about a half hour ago, I didn't know I was going to be on this panel. I thought I was going to be on another panel. So who knows what's going to come out of me. But anyway, my proper introduction is I'm Michael Schaefer, and I am an alcoholic. And my sobriety date is October 15th, 2007. I am a proud member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I want to make clear, I am not a spokesperson for Alcoholics Anonymous. Everything that I say is based on my experience drinking. So, I could tell you a lot about my story, but you could hear a lot of other stories like it. I'll say it in a nutshell. I drank a lot. I drugged a lot. Caused problems, and my life was unmanageable. So, thanks for letting me share. No, I'm just there was a story from earlier this week. I was in a meeting, and I'll eventually get around to the point of the story. But someone shared about it was a step meeting, 12 and 12 meeting. And we were focusing on the essay on step 6 in the 12 and 12. And of course, step 6 is we're entirely ready to have God remove all my defects of character. Well, someone in the meeting basically said, I really think they should rewrite this chapter so that it's not so gender specific. Because I knew someone who really took exception to this chapter, went out and started drinking and died. Okay. Well, that stinks. I hate to hear that story. But I would posit that we could all get together, and if it was even possible for us to all contribute to a book that no one would find offensive in some way, shape, or form, there would still be someone who would get pissed off at a meeting, go out and drink and die. Everyone in recovery encounters barriers to recovery. And those barriers are their own barriers. I hated to hear that story, but I'm sorry. If my level of comfort isn't more important than my sobriety, I'm going to go out and drink and I'm going to die. That's all there is to it. And so the point of that story is to get into this idea of a power greater than ourselves, which will restore us to sanity. Now, I have been living in the Washington, D.C. area. I grew up in Maryland. Very, very sophisticated people, okay? People who don't want to be told what to believe in. Don't tell me, don't use that word, God. No, 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 no. I don't like that word. Well, I recognize that a lot of people have gone through experiences when they were being raised or have gone through some very negative experiences with organized religion. And I'm sorry if you don't like the word God, but it appears a lot in the big book. Now, you can make that a barrier to your sobriety, or you could just kind of think of a different word. And there are a lot of different ways to express a power greater than yourself. When someone believes or is even willing to believe in a power greater than themselves, they are on their way. Now, wait a minute. Believes, I get that. Willing to believe? You mean all I have to do is be willing? I would even say you could be willing to be willing. You know, but eventually what it means is, okay, I'm open to the concept. Okay, I can close myself to that concept. And if I completely close myself to all spiritual concepts, I might go out and drink and die. It's a heck of a lot more important for me to be sober and live so that I can be useful. You know, Gene was just talking about at the end of the day, that's what it's about. That's why I'm here. You know how many times I drank it and drove with my kids in the car? I want one of those little certificates that takes away all the stuff I ever did. I mean, I should be dead or in prison or somewhere, like in an institution with a wet brain. That's what my behavior should have led to. But it didn't. And the reason it didn't was because some force, a heck of a lot more powerful than me, saw it fit to get me sober, to keep me sober, and to allow me to stand here in front of you and talk to you about recovery. That wasn't my plan. I wouldn't have written that. I wouldn't have predicted that for myself in any way, shape, or form. There was a dear old fella passed away last year from our home group. And he used to say, the only thing that I need to know about a higher power is that I'm not it. And for me, that's good enough. I don't need to go any further. And, you know, AA was developed in part because someone went to Bill W. and said, why don't you consider your own conception of God? Okay, so really, I don't have a whole lot more to add than that because I feel like that's the essence of what we're talking about is this idea that there is something bigger than me that is making things happen in my life. And sometimes I get really impatient with that, but it happens. It happens. I have to have the faith that it's going to happen. I have to have hope that it's going to happen. And I have to accept that it's going to happen over a time frame that I'm not going to be aware of until it happens. Patience and faith. I ask for that in my prayers every morning. Thanks so much.
Hey, Michael, tell Scott Fitz we missed him, but he's still a good person to come. That was on my agenda.
And I haven't found it anything.
Hey, and thank you for sharing. You shared, you've got a powerful story. I'd love to hear the longer version of both of you guys. So we both got it. It really is the mirror of the movie, the good, the bad, the ugly, the good. I say that. Hey, I wanna throw something out to you, and this really is for the workers. Those of you who are on the front lines dealing with the problems. Some of y'all in here do that? Raise your hand. I'm just curious about everybody. Online, I know it has to be. So for the workers and the caregivers that are dealing with people that just seems like there's no way. Let me tell you a story. You may have heard a version of it before. What a difference you can make. Grandfather and a grandson walking on the beach, having a great time together, beautiful morning. Grandfather being taller, comes up over a knoll. He sees it first. Grandson still just frolicking. The grandfather looks ahead and he sees him on the beachfront. Dozens and dozens of stranded starfish. The little grandson just keeps running fast as he can right up to him. The granddad walks thinking, oh no, how am I going to tell him? How am I going to do this? So he watches the grandson walk up to where the starfish are, and the little grandson kneels down and he picks one up. He throws it out into the surf, out to the ocean. And for a while, the grandfather just stands there thinking, oh, I wish I didn't have to do this. And he even has tears start to roll down his eyes, cheeks. So he leans down and he says, grandson, I'm sorry, we can't do anything about this. We can't make a difference here. And the little grandboy, without hesitation, he reaches down, grabs another starfish, and he throws it as far as his little arm will let him throw it. And he looks up and says, Papa, we made a difference for that one. You're making a difference. On the days when you think you're not, you are. Don't quit. Don't give up. Don't lose hope. Thank you for letting us be a part of your day in this program.
Does anyone have any questions?
I probably do. Listening to your stories, I'm one of these, I'm not quite as scientific as I like to understand. And listening to your stories and backgrounds were so. I went down the same path that you didn't want to go. I had that. You know, loved and nurtured and very, religious upbringing and father that had that. But yet you still had the same, I guess what predisposes and what kind of, it just seems like there is no one thing that triggers people to have addiction. Is my question making any sense? Okay.
I'll take a stab at it, but you're probably gonna do better at this. You know, mine was, I had to come to, I really do mean when I say I've eaten so much crow in my life, I know when the taste is coming on. There is a moment of realization that you can blame, you can fault, you can do whatever you want to do. Quite frankly, there is an element of alcohol abuse in my family, without being more specific. I think there's credence to, and I know there's different approaches on whether it's a gene kind of thing but for me, there had to be a moment of where I couldn't blame this on anybody else. I couldn't blame it on my mother dying, and I was a mama's boy, and that changed my world. That's not what I was planning on. I couldn't blame it on certain things that I wish would have happened that didn't happen. I became more dependent on alcohol as a crutch, and it was costing me. It was costing me friendships. It about cost me my life. This dear brother made the comment, I could have been killed in a wreck more than once. It about cost me my family. But I had a wife who began praying me to change instead of not trying to make me change, and my life changed. But I also grew up with a faith, with an involvement in church, and I always felt uncomfortable that I was away from what I believed. And, you know, from my personal journey, for whatever it's worth, God used a sequence of events and people in my life to totally bring me back to where I think he wanted me to go, and he's brought me. I feel unworthy to get to do what I do because I probably shouldn't be here to do it. But now I feel like I've got a sense of responsibility. When you tell your story, it's not always pretty, is it, Jim? It takes a lot of courage. You know, people think I'm a, pastor sometimes that's never had a wayward whatever, and that's not the case. So, but I believe, really, with an elementary childlike innocence, I believe there's a God. I believe there's a heaven and a hell. And, you know, the only reason we're involved with this conference is when I met with Sandy Kerr to talk about something she did a few years ago like this with more faith base. I asked her if there was an opportunity to address that. She said there was, and that's why we got behind it.
I'll take my crack at it. I'll preface it by saying I am not a clinician. I don't have a doctorate. I have my lived experience, I have work experience, and I have education. I've heard and read a lot of good things. I'm pretty, I'm more or less sold on what the clinicians call the biopsychosocial model, meaning that there's three different components that'll lead to an outcome of substance use disorder. There's the biological, in whether it's genetics, predisposition of brain structure, what have you. I don't understand that part, but like a lot of people in my family got bad drinking and drug problems. And that goes back a long time. And then, psychologically, pretty strong corollary evidence with the adverse childhood experiences study, the experience of trauma, leading to later outcomes or predispositions for substance use disorder. And then there's the social factor. The key difference in my story is like I was dunked into an environment that was filled with positive social support that was geared towards sobriety, but not just like touchy-feely type, like, I was held accountable, and when I acted inappropriately, I was addressed about it and given an opportunity to grow and change and move beyond it. But also my familial social supports. I should have mentioned my grandmother in my story. Wonderful woman, prayed for me my whole life. I would be dead today if it were not for her. And I didn't appreciate any of that till I got sober. But like those things make a huge difference. And so I think all three of those components play a role in both the outset and the outcomes of substance use disorders.
What was the question?
What makes one person more predisposed to being addicted to something? Then, you and I walk into the bar, I haven't drank and I don't drink again for another 6 weeks, and yet you don't early the bar, just kind of
It's the craziest thing.
Yeah, I mean, and I was just, I didn't really think there was an answer, but just kind of hearing what everybody else thinks.
So here's what I'll tell you. I was born, I have no doubt in my mind, I was born an alcoholic. There's no question. Although when I told my dad that I was an alcoholic, he said, well, we never had one of them before. We've had some damn heavy drinkers, but we haven't had any alcoholic. Well, we haven't had anybody admit it.
Yeah.
So, because I picked it up. I mean, just right away. The first time I drank, I wanted more. And, in the big book, the doctor's opinion, which was written by a guy named Silkworth, who was the attending physician of Bill Wilson. He talked about it being a manifestation of an allergy. Now, there are a lot of, there's been a lot of research on the actual metabolic process that goes on. And it has something to do with the way that each individual's body metabolizes alcohol. And in some people, it metabolizes it such that they have a drink, they may have two, they start to feel a little tipsy, they might even feel a little nauseous, they might feel a little uncomfortable, and they don't want any more of it. But in the alcoholic, when they have that first drink, they immediately want another. It's called the phenomenon of craving. We want more, we want more. There's not enough in the bar for us until we're out. Now, I've known people who never had a problem with allergies to ragweed their entire life, right? You have to have seen it. And at 40 years old, all of a sudden they start sneezing and wheezing and everything. Well, I've come to believe that alcoholism can happen the same way, that we can drink ourselves into alcoholism in that way, because the effect of alcohol on the entire system that goes from ingestion to metabolization to through the liver and out, all of that, every piece of it is affected by alcohol. And so the more we drink, the more that system is affected, the more we want to drink. It just kind of happens that way. So, you know, I was in a fraternity in college. Surprise, surprise. Lots of guys drank alcohol, but they graduated, they got married, they had kids, they grew up and they stopped. Okay, they weren't alcoholics. They hadn't ingested enough to drink themselves into the disease, or they weren't born with it genetically, or whatever it was. But, you know, there were others like me who didn't stop. And combined with the psychosocial piece of it, it made me want it even more, because Silkworth says people drink because they like the feeling. They like the effect. They like the sense of ease and comfort that comes with taking that first drink. And that was what I always chased. I always chased that initial ease and comfort. I didn't always set out to get blind drunk. But that happened every time. I never had just one night, ever. And so, you know, I think that's the way it starts, because alcohol life made me, I liked the way it felt. Or, put another way, I liked the way it didn't make me feel.
Yeah.
It didn't make me think about the problems I was having. Didn't make me think about the emotions that were very uncomfortable for me to feel. Didn't make me think about what happened to me when I was 5 years old. Didn't make me think about, I don't think it's any different. We were at a conference, it's not just about alcohol. I don't think it's that different for anything else. We do it because we like the way it feels, and we like the way it keeps us from feeling.
You know, we all talked about a date. You mentioned a date, you mentioned a date, I mentioned 30 years. I learned this, but it worked for me. You know, everybody has their own. So it took a while for this to register for me, because I'm not a real bright light. I'm historically slow to catch on sometimes, but to use the term 30 years undefeated, I came to realize there's merit, there's strength in being able to every day, every week, every month, every year, you know, 30 years now, how many every year's removed? I know me enough to know if I went and just innocently took one more drink, took a drink, the distancing element of the 30 years is gone for me. So what the heck? That's my victory. That's one of the victories. I'm that far removed. If I just go out, yes, and innocent, I can only take one. All of that's gone. I think I know me enough to know what would happen, because that's been part of my distancing element of, good for this.
But, and I just want to add for the audience, I think we're pretty close to time. If you work in the field, or are, alongside the field working on this issue, do not exclude your faith-based community. Reach out to them, see how they want to help, see how they can help, and then also help them understand how not to enable. And we didn't talk about it, but I know you know what I mean. And the same for the fellowships and the programs of Alcoholics Anonymous and other 12-step fellowships. If you're here in person, the Area 26, which represents pretty much the whole of Kentucky, their cooperation with the professional communities chairs here, I highly encourage you to get with them, find out what literature, because, all these things, if you are a professional in the field, I'm sure you have seen people that you have been unable to help despite your best and most earnest efforts. That's where these other systems can come in. And that's where they can help. I don't think any of us try to claim to be everything to everybody or to have all the answers. I think that's what this whole thing is about is, I think we're all humble enough to say, I don't have the one solution to this problem, but, working together, hopefully we find what works for each individual.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And then,